Final hour overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. We'll get to our best bets later in the hour. Big hour. KEEGAN MATHESON will join us of MLB.com. He's down in Cincinnati. Jays Reds tonight. Catch up with KEEGAN. Dave Naylor, the nail gun, coming off a big Edmonton Elks win last night. Long overdue.
Oh, huge.
So parading in the streets out in Edmonton, and I would assume some significant levels of shame in Hamilton.
Yes.
You can't lose to the Elks, man. You can't, let alone at home. I guess it's even worse if you lose on the road because nobody loses in Edmonton.
22 straight.
Nobody loses in
22
Edmonton.
straight wins for the road team.
Yes, but the Elks off the schneid last night. So the nail gun coming up a little bit later this hour. Again, Bo Bichette not activated tonight, but Kevin Kiermaier has been, and Trevor Richards has been as well. So both guys available tonight, but no Bo tonight and no George Springer. We've been talking a lot about that today. Springer has had a relatively healthy season for him.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you're anticipating something, and he's not going on the IL to our knowledge. So it's probably nicks and bruises, something just nagging at him, which is fine. And with all that time off this week anyway, they were off Monday, off yesterday. They're off again next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe this is a part of the whole, shut down George for a little bit here and hope he's ready to rock for the final 35 games as opposed to the final 40.
And really, it's like Steve Phillips said earlier in the show, Hayes, the reason you got this guy is because he's Mr. Clutch in the playoffs, right? He's a World Series MVP. He knows how to bring it when it matters. He's maybe not about the 6-month grind as much as he's about, Game 5, Game 6, Game 7 in a big series.
Exactly. Like that's what he won the World Series MVP in 17. You're right. It wasn't Bregman. It wasn't Altuve. It wasn't Correa. It was George Springer. And I wonder if that's their plan still come playoff time, is to have him batting leadoff. Because he has not been batting leadoff now for a couple of weeks. And they moved him around a little bit. At times he said second in the lineup, at times fourth, fifth. But if what you're saying is right, and I do think it's accurate that's really why they brought him in. Clearly, to be a leader, you pay a guy that kind of money. You need him to play during the regular season. Of
course.
They can't take anything for granted. They're only a half game into the playoffs. They're only a half game up on Seattle with 40 games to go. They're going to need production, especially at the plate, which has been lacking for them significantly this season. But when you signed Springer, it was with the understanding that eventually Vladdy was coming, Bichette was coming, and you were going to round out the rest of the roster. You brought him here with the anticipation of him being a playoff performer, batting leadoff.
Yes.
And Whit Merrifield's done a pretty good job batting leadoff recently. But I got to think, if they can get Springer back, get him healthy, they get into the playoffs, it would not shock me. Game 1 of the wild card, you saw the lineup come out and Springer's hitting leadoff again. Well, I would think that's what they're hoping for.
I think they see that as optimal, right?
Yeah, I think that would be their optimal lineup, 1 through 9. Let's head down to Cincinnati now and catch up with KEEGAN MATHESON of MLB.com. We were talking about Springer's absence tonight, Keegan. It's kind of a curious case because they were off twice already this week. They're off again on Monday. What's your understanding of what's going on with George?
Yeah, it's interesting, guys, how they manage and stack up some of these off days. Similar to a couple of days ago with Danny Jansen, getting that extra day. You would think, and I often assume from looking at this, that an off day is the off day. But the Blue Jays sometimes like to use those off days to give a guy 2 in a row, to get all the way back, to get fresh for a run, for whatever it is. But so like you're talking about off the top, guys, having Springer eventually back in that leadoff spot is, I think, how this has to look. The Blue Jays signed him to be a star player, yeah, but they signed him to be a star in the postseason. That's what he's known for. He has that reputation. You want to get him back there by the time it really matters, and Merrifield has been very good in that spot. I like him there, but this whole thing works better when Springer is in that spot, and ideally they don't have to give him too many more off days the rest of the way.
Well, on top of Springer not in the lineup tonight, Bo Bichette not activated today. Any reason to believe that's anything but the premeditated plan? Plays a couple days in Buffalo, takes another day off, and he'll be back in the lineup tomorrow?
Yeah, I think this is just how it was planned out, guys. Unfortunately, that rain out in Buffalo a couple of nights ago kind of extended that plan by a day. So Bo is just getting here today. Didn't see him around the clubhouse when I was in there an hour ago. So Must be on his way getting in, whether that's a connecting flight or whatever it is. But he'll be in tonight. John Schneider said as long as everything is okay, it checks out okay, he'll be in there tomorrow. But I wouldn't read too much into that. He will be in there tomorrow as long as he gets here, and it's looking like he'll be back shortstop as often as he can. The odd DH day, but you want him at shortstop as much as possible.
So, Keegan, the staff's been so good this year. The pitching's carried the Blue Jays a lot of the way to where they are. Jose Barrios goes tonight against Cincinnati. He hasn't been quite up to the standard that he set earlier in the season in his past few starts. What have you made of his recent work, and is there anything to be concerned about there?
Yeah, with Barrios, he was in such a consistent run there for the longest time. Not as good lately, but I think that you haven't seen him stray too much. It's all about fastball control with Barrios, which isn't the most exciting thing in the world, but that's the difference between this year and last year. And it's why last year, guys, it didn't exactly look like a disaster. When you look at his numbers and Yusei Kikuchi's last year, they had about the same ERA, but Kikuchi, to me, looked a lot worse a lot of the time. Barrios was not scattering the ball. He wasn't all over the place, but his fastball was just a bit off, and it was getting hit. It's not as off lately, but that fastball control is everything for him. It sets up that big breaking ball that makes him so good. And right now, guys, the Blue Jays need a bit of that run from Barrios because looking to the postseason, yeah, you have Kevin Gausman. Fantastic. You're very happy with that. But who is your number two guy going to be that can match up with a really good number two on someone else's team? Kikuchi, Barrios, Bassett, those are good options, but the Blue Jays need a great one to win a series, so they need someone to really step forward in that role.
With Keegan Matheson, MLB.com, Jays, Reds tonight down in Cincinnati. We've been discussing Vladdy a lot recently, really, since he came up. But this year his production is down. His stats are really unflattering considering his reputation. He's got an OPS plus of 116. He's hit 18 home runs. He's hit into 17 double plays. Everyone speaks of the analytics and the underlying numbers and the exit velocity as just basically suggesting at some point it's going to break out. Where do you stand on this conundrum that is Vladdy at this point?
Yeah, this is the billion-dollar question of this year, guys. If you want to be literal, there's hundreds of millions in this question, really, looking forward. And I've heard that 100 times this season, that there are some underlying numbers. It will come around. And there are. Those numbers are real. They're there. They do point towards this being better. But it is August 18th. It's been later for a while now. It's way past due for us to see those play out on the field. When I look up at the scoreboard every night, we do not count expected stats or expected runs. They count what actually happens every night. That's what matters. And you need to see it eventually. So when it's April, when it's May, and the guy's numbers are off and it points to something better, absolutely, I do give that a lot of weight. That matters. It's important to do that. But as the season goes on, I think you need to start looking at it differently. And again, August 18, it has to happen soon, but we have said the word soon 100 times this season, and it's been a tough one for Vladdy. All of the talent in the world can take over a game, can carry a team. We've seen it before, but we haven't seen it in a little bit.
Hey, Keegan, you're around this team all the time, and I'm you pick up things, you see things that maybe we don't see on the broadcasts, and I'm curious about just the mood around the team. Like they always say, hitting can be contagious, offense can be contagious. What kind of contagion is Vladdy giving off? If he's not having the season maybe he's expecting, does that have an effect on the other guys around this club in your observation?
It always will. And guys, I've said with Vladdy a few different times now, I think we might have talked about this around the home run derby, is that you can talk about exit velocities, all of these fancy stats. They matter, absolutely. But with Vladdy, more than any other player that I see, that I cover, how he's feeling, that smile on his face, is he goofing around, that matters for him. We saw that in the home run derby. You saw that big kid come out again. And normally that's not something I put much weight or thought into, but when Vladdy is going up, having fun and saying, hey, throw me a pitch, I'm going to beat you, that's when he's at his best. When he is at his loosest, he's at his best. And at times this year when he struggled, you have seen him try to be the hero, try to hit the Blue Jays out of a slump. And I think that when the rest of this lineup starts hitting, it's going to be contagious for Vladdy. Now, that's not how you want it to be, guys. You want Vladdy to be leading the way. But I think that once this lineup starts breaking out a bit, that pressure's off, that could help him because you haven't seen that loose, fun-loving guy as often this season. And as Vladdy goes, this lineup goes. He is capable of things nobody else is.
With Keegan Matheson, I read earlier this hour that I guess John Schneider was speaking to the back end of his bullpen and suggested that there may be scenarios where they decide to close games using someone other than Jordan Romano. That would suggest maybe Romano comes in the 7th, 8th, maybe a high leverage situation. How do you interpret that, and how likely do you think it could be that we actually see someone like Hicks get the ball in the 9th as opposed to Romano?
Yeah, I would interpret that as, I think Schneider said, let's call it an openness instead of an active strategy. I certainly think the Blue Jays would and should prefer Jordan Romano in the 9th inning, not just because of the pitcher he is, but we have seen how the 9th is a different animal for guys. It's a mental game as much as physical. Romano has succeeded there in big moments, and we've also seen how things look a little different in the 7th or 8th inning for him sometimes. So I interpret that as more of an openness. And, hey, if Romano has closed back-to-back days, you have Jordan Hicks. You have a guy throwing 102. That's a great place to be. Or if there is a situation that really, really calls for a specific matchup, you're open to it, but I think when you write out the depth chart, it is still closer Jordan Romano.
Keegan, you look at the near-term schedule, and it looks like if you're sort of looking at the two-horse race between the Blue Jays and the Mariners, that the Mariners got a bit of an advantage here. The Blue Jays got a tough stretch here with Cincy and Baltimore. Seattle has a little bit easier schedule. How much stock do you put in that? Like, is it you just gonna have to kind of ride the tide of the next 40 games, and there's going to be ups and downs, or do you think that is an advantage for Seattle that could have an effect on this race?
Well, it has to be an advantage if you have that weaker schedule, guys. It's you always need to be wary of that scrappy last-place team that wants to prove something, but at the same time, a lot of those teams out of the race are promoting rookies. They're bringing up prospects. It's not pretty at this point of the season. And keep in mind, they have traded away, probably, any of their useful veteran players after the deadline. So those are valuable games to have. You can be playing some last-place teams. Now, if you put the Mariners lineup and the Blue Jays lineup down in front of your average baseball fan and say, who can you name on each team, they're going to name a heck of a lot more Blue Jays players. But as we see, that hasn't mattered much this year. The Blue Jays have far more talent, but all that matters is the wins and losses. And the Mariners have been great lately. And one thing I'll highlight, too, guys, is that Julio Rodriguez has been great lately. That's a young star player rising to the moment when the team needs them, and that is what the Blue Jays need.
Well, the Jays, again, have 40 games left. They're sitting here with a half-game lead on Seattle. It's not as if it's insurmountable that they couldn't catch Houston and or Tampa at the same time. But with 40 games left, what is your projection, Keegan, for what that record's got to look like to secure a playoff spot?
I think you need to be getting comfortably up over 90 wins. I think if they're playing something like 5 or 6 games above 500, guys, that gets them right to that 90 number. You need to be clearing 90, I think, pretty easily to be getting into this, even in the era of 3 wildcard teams, which has kind of moved the goalposts, sometimes for good, sometimes not. But I think you need to be getting up to those 92, 93 wins because Seattle is a team, we saw it at points last year, where they can just capture some magic down the stretch, especially if they are playing weaker teams. That can happen quickly. And looking to the tail end of the season, the Blue Jays have those matchups with the Yankees, with the Rays. Those can be tough. So you need to create some room when you can. You want to be getting into those 92, 93-plus zones.
Always great having you on, buddy. Enjoy it down there in Cincinnati. We'll do it again soon.
You got it, guys. Take care.
Keegan Matheson of MLB.com, Jays, Reds tonight. Again, Kevin Kiermaier's been activated. Trevor Richards, Matt Chapman back in the lineup as well tonight. He'll be playing third. And Bo Bichette expected to rejoin the team tomorrow. We'll see about Springer.
Yeah.
But you got Barrios tonight, Bassett tomorrow, Ryu on Sunday.
You know, it's funny, Hayes. We did that 25 and under players in the 4 major sports that have a chance to get on the all-time Mount Rushmore of their sport. And if we would have done that 2 years ago, Vladdy's on that list, is he not?
He could be.
He might have been.
He could
Would
be.
have thought about it.
Well,
didn't even think about him this time.
No, Vladdy, he can't be now, right?
Oh.
Exactly. Like you had a Ronald Acuna Jr. on your list. I was thinking Acuna. I was thinking Juan Soto.
Yeah. Jonas's guy.
Yeah, Jonas's guy, the greatest hitter Jonas has ever seen before, Juan Soto. And listen, Soto's got the World Series. I believe he won World Series MVP that year. It might have been Rendon, but I think it was him. And he's young, and he's put up staggering numbers. So you can make a case for that. But you're right, Vladdy, after 21, would have been in that conversation without question, and is no longer. Austin Matthews technically qualified for that list. He didn't turn 26 for another month or so.
Right.
But, if he had a cup or two by now, I probably would have been on my list.
Sure.
But he doesn't.
No,
you got to have some playoff history. You got to have some. And again, some of the guys we picked have not even played in the league yet, so they haven't been able to build that up. But the flip side of it is they haven't been able to drag themselves out of the conversation.
That's what I mean. Most people are just out of the conversation by the time they turn 25, right?
Yeah, they get to 25 and you're like, listen, great player, Hall of Fame player, but all-time great Mount Rushmore? No, it's
just so hard.
It's incredibly difficult to do. It is an interesting question, like of the big four in North America, NFL, NHL, MLB, NBA, which Mount Rushmore has the ability to be broken into?
Yes.
Like which one is most accessible? Because they're all very difficult. Like you come up with the four best players of any of those leagues, you're talking obviously giants of the game.
Well, yeah.
And you're talking retired players as well who have already established their record.
Yeah, that's why it's like the Mount Rushmore almost has to be expanded. Like, the traditional Mount Rushmore that actually exists in one of the Dakotas it's four people.
Right.
But you almost got to go bigger. Like, baseball's been around for a century and a half. Like, you can't expect guys to get into the top four of all time.
Right.
It's very difficult.
It's very difficult to do. And you're also now you're in the modern age, you're trying to make a case for someone that you never saw play.
Right.
That makes it very difficult as well. Like, who am I to say Willie Mays is or isn't on the Mount Rushmore?
I mean, the nice thing about baseball is the numbers.
The statistics hold up.
The numbers hold up, right?
Yes.
Whereas in basketball, it's much more subjective. In hockey, the numbers are like the counting numbers in hockey say a lot. Like Like Ovi's going to raise his stock a lot in the all-time conversation if he can get past Gretzky, right? In the all-time goals list, right? Like he may pass Sid, even though Sid's got 3 cups and Ovi's got 1. Mm-hmm. Ovi's going to have a lot more individual honors by the time they're done, right?
He's got 3 Hearts. He's won all those Rockets. If he's scored more goals than anyone in NHL history, that's tough to go against.
He's been all NHL first team a lot more than Sid. I was looking at all that stuff today just when we were talking about this, and it's, what does that stuff mean? I don't know. Like, Sidney's been the engine that's driven 3 Stanley Cup winners. Isn't that enough? Some people would say that's the most important thing.
Right. On top of the 2010, 2014 Canada teams.
Well, there's that too.
That also won where he was the man on those teams.
Yeah, like Ovi was the face of the Sochi Olympics, and it didn't go so well for the Russians.
No, it was a mess.
Yeah,
exactly. That was his big, and that was still when he was known as great regular season goal scoring performer.
Right.
But biggest moments, what are you going to get out of him? And to his credit, he's changed that reputation greatly.
He certainly has.
And with what he did in that Cup run, that went a long, long way. But we've discussed this before. I don't think it's good for any respective sport to be just a prisoner of your past.
No.
And just say, well, it's not possible. Don't even talk about it. Yet it comes down to like a level of respect as well. Like if using hockey, for example, like Gordie Howe was in there because he's the great Gordie Howe. Mm-hmm. And because he was so great, he was such a classy guy. Everyone has a Gordie Howe story.
Of course.
The amazing longevity of Gordie Howe. It's like, well, you can't take him out. It's really, you can't. He's got to be a lock to be a top 4 player all time.
And part of the thing with that, is because Gretzky's always kept him there, right?
Right.
He's Gretzky's favorite player.
That was his favorite player, yes.
So as long as Gretzky's alive and in the conversation, and he very much is, doing his nightly bets on the big broadcaster down in the States, as long as Gretzky's steering that conversation, Gordie ain't going anywhere. by my talent, right? But I know what you're saying.
Yes.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah, and again, you look at his career, very different era. The numbers were staggering.
Well,
the longevity is worth something for sure.
Incredible.
How tough he was, how great he was, an unbelievable player. But again, saying you're going from 4 to 5 is not insulting, or it shouldn't be considered like an impossibility.
But I'll tell you what, like the beauty of the NHL right now, and I hope it continues. I hope the idea that we're getting back toward the higher scoring days, like the idea that McDavid's reeling off a 150-point season. At least we're talking like those Gretzky years with 200-plus points don't seem so crazy anymore.
Right.
Whereas when we had guys winning, the Art Ross Trophy with
89 points,
80-something points, that's not fun.
No, that's apples to oranges.
Good hockey, and I know it was tougher, and I know all the rest of that, but I want to see some stats. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and they are largely driven by the one guy. Yeah, Erik Karlsson had 101 points.
Right.
We haven't seen that in a
long
time.
And it was like the league average goal scoring was up by a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
The most since the early 90s. So that's a good sign to me. When it was goaltender dominant, and that was a problem.
Yes, agreed. I saw this earlier. Big Head Hockey, which is a pretty cool follow on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were speaking of Gordie Howe, and everyone's obviously well aware of how long Gordie Howe played. They posted the equivalent of when players would have retired if they played as long as Gordie Howe.
Yeah.
So again, Gordie by the end was going out playing like a shift. He wasn't really playing, but he was technically in there. Bobby Orr would have played until 99-2000.
Wow.
Which is incredible. Gretzky until 2012, 2013. The players that would have Pavel Bure would have just retired this year in 22-23. Lindros next year, Forsberg next year. Sidney Crosby will retire in 2038, 2039.
Incredible.
So if Sid were to follow along the same path that Gordie Howe did, Sid will be playing for another 16 years. So put that into perspective.
Crazy.
That is pretty amazing. Imagine Bobby Orr still playing. He would have played at Scotiabank.
Yeah.
Like Bobby Orr, if he followed the lead of Gordie Howe, would have been playing when the ACC opened.
Right.
In 99.
Incredible.
Pretty incredible. All right, Dave Naylor coming up. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel a little bit later in the hour. Mail-in and Fridays brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better with fish bowls and frosty pints on the BP patio. Grab your sunscreen. Let's have a weekend. See you on the BP patio tonight. Dave Naylor still to come. Our best bet still to come. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. If I could bet on the Edmonton Elks every day, I would. I'm a big supporter of betting on the Elks.
Okay.
Right? Because they don't always win, but they cover, Dave. And as you know, good teams win, great teams cover.
That's right.
And the Elks happened to accomplish both yesterday. They were a 5.5-point dog. They finally got themselves a win last night. Parading in the streets of Edmonton, an absolute disgust in the streets of Hamilton. You can't lose to Edmonton, but Hamilton found a way to do that.
They did.
Chat about it. Among many other things, here's our good buddy, our TSN football insider, Dave Naylor. Put that into perspective for us, Dave. How necessary was that win for Edmonton last night?
Well, I mean, especially what had gone on the week before with the dismissal of the president, the understanding that the team is financially locked in and can't really make a move on the coach unless their accountants say they can, and that may be difficult at any point this season. I think it just, when you're around football teams in general, when they don't win, I mean, I'm talking about like week after week after week after week, everybody gets ornery, because it's not like baseball that, sometimes you lose a game at night and you're playing the next day at 12:10 or something, right? It's that 6 days in between sometimes it's longer based on the schedule that the stench of loss kind of hangs. And when it's been nothing but losing, they still got to win at home. But on the flip side, and the absolutely the most disappointing team in the CFL this year is the Hamilton Tiger Cats. I mean, they pushed their chips to the table, last fall when they acquired Bo Levi Mitchell. They basically said, we think he's got lots left. And we really haven't found out. I mean, he's played 3 games. The last one, when he came back from, he played pretty well. And then you get the freakish injury, on a kneel down when the game was decided, because a player took a penalty and backed them back to their own 1-yard line, and he didn't want to take a safety that could have kept the game alive. They signed a bunch of players. Duke Williams, former Buffalo Bill, former Saskatchewan Rough Rider. I mean, there was no question. The Grey Cup's in Hamilton. This team has the longest Grey Cup drought in the CFL. They're hosting it for the second time in 3 years. And, man, it is look, it's the number 3 quarterback, and, that's just kind of the beginning of the challenges they've had. And, I don't know, they changed play callers. But when you're dealing with a guy who's got a handful of starts, you're really limited on what you can do, and I think we saw that again last night in the Ticats side.
Okay, so Naylor, the Elks, they get a win, so they're 1-9. But as you point out, they still got to win at home. You've documented the atrocity that is their 22-game home win streak, the longest home field win streak or losing streak in North American sports history. We had Herm Edwards on the show, and we asked him, what would you do if you inherited this team as the coach? And he was like, go in a different tunnel, or flip the lights for the darks, or the darks for the lights, depending on what uniform you're normally wearing at home. Is this thing psychological, the home problem, or is it just, does this road win carry over to their game against Ottawa at home next week?
Well, I think there's an element of it because, and I actually broke down a few of these games, over the 23-game streak, and there's some freakish losses in there, right? There is a pattern of letting games get away from them, and all of a sudden it's here they come. So I think there's unquestionably, when you're living it, when you're reminded of it every day, and you saw even, Chris Jones hasn't owned every one of these home losses, but even 2-3 games into the season when he was getting asked about the streak, it's kind of like, when Leaf people get asked about not winning a cup since 1967 and they've only been on the job a year and a half, they tend to react with a bit of resistance to the notion that they own this thing, right? And Jones kind of did that when it came to the home losing streak. But, I guess the biggest thing is, they changed quarterbacks, they changed offensive coordinators, and they looked better against, a very good team in Winnipeg, and they looked okay against a team in Hamilton. And, it's one of those things you think of as, well, they'd come out with Jarius Jackson as their offensive coordinator at the start of the season and Trey Ford as their quarterback and got him all the reps instead of Taylor Cornelius, who they'd signed to a deal with guaranteed money in it for this year and next. Where would they be? And it's funny, you mentioned the Lions. I was at Detroit Lions camp this week where they were doing the joint practices with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I saw J.T. Barrett, who is the assistant quarterback coach of the Lions, former Ohio State starter, maybe best remembered that he's the guy who kept Joe Burrow on the bench at Ohio State and made him transfer to LSU. He was the guy that Chris Jones originally signed, sort of to be the potential quarterback of his team. Now, I'm not an expert on J.T. Barrett, so I can't tell you how his game would have translated, to the Canadian Football League. But it was just funny with all this Edmonton stuff going on and the consternation about their quarterback camp. There was J.T. Barrett on the field in front of me in Detroit, just, tossing balls to quarterbacks.
With Dave Naylor, well, you mentioned, obviously in Detroit, Jacksonville, that means Nathan Rourke would have been kicking around. We saw what he did in the preseason last weekend. What is your understanding on his status within the Jags depth chart and quarterback room, and how likely is it that, he sticks around and possibly is a Jag for quite some time?
Oh, I think he's going to make the team. And I think it was a good indication of that, the fact they only brought 3 quarterbacks to camp, which is great for him because you're not sharing reps with 5 guys. Now, all that said, I think this depth chart is pretty locked in. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is 23, right? I mean, the Jags would be happy if he's going to take every snap for the next 15 years.
Right. And
then you go to C.J. Beathard, who's a 29-year-old, 6 years experience. A lot of times in the NFL, and people maybe don't kind of appreciate this, but when you have a team that has an investment in a player like Trevor Lawrence, they're not looking for the number 2 to push this guy. They're looking for the number 2 to support that guy and help him be a winner and help him prepare. And obviously if he gets hurt, you get your turn. But it's not a situation where, you're looking for somebody to push him. They don't need Trevor Lawrence to be pushed. And look, I think there's undoubtedly, and I was told this when I was at the NFL Combine back in February by somebody who kind of had some knowledge of the situation, that it was undoubtedly true that Nathan Rourke would come out with the number 3 job. But here's the scenario where Nathan Rourke could play in Jacksonville, okay? Trevor Lawrence gets hurt for 6 weeks. okay? 6-week injury, not unforeseen in the National Football League. C.J. Beathard goes in and plays and is ordinary, and they lose, 2 out of 3 games. And that's where everything that Nathan Rourke is putting on tape in the preseason is going to matter. Because the more he puts on tape, the more he shows that he might be ready for an opportunity, and the more he shows that he has dynamic playmaking ability that not other quarterbacks don't necessarily have, the more likely he is to get an opportunity. And that's where you could see, again, after a few starts, that somebody in the organization is going to say, why don't we give Nathan Rourke a start? And the one thing about his appearance in Dallas the other day that I was there for, it was not just, hey, look, he made a spectacular play, right? I mean, it was so good, and I was sitting in the press box at an absolute bird's eye view of it. I think I actually glanced away in a minute because I thought it was over. And then he pops up. Mike McCoy, the quarterback coach of the Jags, told me at practice yesterday that the on-field official told him he almost blew the whistle twice to end the play. That's how wrapped up Nathan was before he popped up and threw a dart to Kadri Olison. That play deserves all the attention it got, but it obscured the fact that he threw for 153 yards and a half. That's, works out to 306 in a game. And after the first drive of the game, which was his first live NFL experience of his life, he was 5 for 5 on third down conversions. And you know how important that stat is.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were 1st and 20s, 2nd and 16s, because the Jags kept taking penalties around him. Even the play that he threw the touchdown on, guys, that was a 3rd and 16 play.
Incredible. So we've talked so much about how rare it is for a Canadian quarterback, a Canadian produced quarterback like Nathan Rourke to be at this level in the CFL and now showing some promise in the NFL, Naylor. I understand you've been spending some time with the next in line of the Rourke family, Curtis Rourke, his younger brother, who's also going to Ohio University, the Ohio Bobcats, I believe it is. What are you seeing out of Curtis, and what kind of potential does he have in his future?
Loads of potential. I mean, if you put this guy's numbers up against other quarterbacks last year, I believe he was 26th in all of college football on QBR. There's a stat about guys who threw this many touchdowns and this many yards and this many interceptions, and I don't have it at my fingertips. But the only 2 guys that qualified under what I'm talking about were Hendon Hooker and Curtis Rourke. And Hendon Hooker was in the Heisman Trophy conversation until he got injured. He's on the Davey O'Brien watch list which is the award for the outstanding quarterback in college football. Now, he plays in the Mid-American Conference, right, which is not a quarterback factory for the NFL. Ben Roethlisberger probably being the best-known NFL quarterback that's ever come out of this conference. Nathan Rourke, of course, came out of this conference. But I had a very interesting experience today. I sat down and interviewed both their head coach, Tim Albin, and their offensive coordinator, Scott Isfording. And one of the things, I asked them was, okay, if I'm an NFL scout who calls you and says, we're looking at Curtis Rourke, what do you think his potential is in the National Football League? And, when you do interviews, you guys have done this, you got an idea that you're probably not going to get an answer on something. You can kind of hear what's going to come, like, hey, we're not here to decide that. We're here to win every week. We help him prepare the best he can, and we let the NFL – that's what I'm expecting, right? That's the answer I'm going to get. I didn't get that. I didn't get that at all. Scott Isfording, the OC, he absolutely told me that Nathan Rourke can play in the National Football League, that he has the throwing ability, that he has, the mental acuity, that he's playing in a system that demands a lot of the quarterback, and he's been able to handle it. And Tim Albin, when I asked him the question, his answer, the first thing he said to me, he just said, draft him. Just draft him.
Wow.
I was quite taken back by what they, and these are interviews on camera. This is not, standing in the corner of the end zone. And the other thing to know about Curtis Rourke as an NFL prospect, he's 6'5".
Yeah, he's huge, right?
He is huge, and he's beefed up on top of that. But I went and saw him last year for the first time when I was down here in October, and he walked out, and I did not know he was 6'5". And I looked at him, I said, how tall are you? He said, I'm 6'5". I said, how did that happen? He said, I had a 2-inch growth spurt after I got to college. And the coaches are talking about when they met Nathan here, when he first got to camp, I think 2017, he said, we have video of Nathan, making plays and his brother standing 3 inches shorter behind him.
Yeah.
Now he's 3 inches taller. So when you put that size, and you know how the NFL prioritizes size in quarterback, I mean, this guy had 25 touchdowns and 4 interceptions last year.
Wow.
That's I mean, you put that kind of accuracy with that kind of size. He threw for more than 3,000 yards. They've got an offense. His number one and number 2 targets are both back with this team. They've got an experienced offensive line. It's funny. I asked them, I said, what would you like to see him do? What's another step for him this season? They said, we'd like to see him get rid of the ball a little quicker because he's taken 1 or 2 hits a game that he shouldn't be taking. And, obviously that over the course of a season or on a single hit can be a real big difference. He suffered an ACL injury last November and fortunately, had the 9-month recovery version, not the 12. He hasn't been declared the starter for their opener on July 26th at San Diego State, but that may happen as early as Monday. But I'll tell you, when Nathan did his tour of NFL teams after the CFL season last year doing his workouts, he got asked a lot about his quote-unquote little brother. And it was funny when I talked to Nathan at his locker in Dallas the other day, and I told him I was going to go and see Curtis on Friday, and told me, of course, they're keeping up with each other, training camps at the same time. And he looked at me and said, this season, he's going to shred it. And I love that expression.
Ooh, man, that would be something. You get the Rourke brothers both making it to the NFL. We don't have a long history of that, do we, Dave?
No.
Well, I mean, it's like Canada's Manning brothers, potentially, right? No. I mean, this is, and here's the other thing about Curtis Rourke. He came out of Canadian high school. Nathan went down and finished his high school in Alabama, and they won a state championship. He had won a championship in Oakville in his grade 11 year. The whole team was coming back, and, he just didn't put the And look, I think that he got a big bump from that Ohio knew the family. They knew Nathan. In fact, they knew Curtis because they'd met him. Just coming around seeing Nathan when he was here. But that's when you put it in that context. This is a kid who stepped out of Canadian high school and is now on the Davey O'Brien watch list, and has his coach and his OC, doubling down on camera that he's an NFL draft pick. And oh, by the way, in roughly 150 years of Ohio Bobcat football, they've never had a quarterback drafted to the NFL.
Wow.
Let's see what happens. Right, we got 7 rounds, I believe, in Green Bay, Wisconsin next spring.
Exciting, man.
We'll see if they make it up there. Great stuff, Naylor. We appreciate it, buddy. We'll do it again soon.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun.
You got it. Dave Naylor, our TSN Football Insider. Yeah, that'd be quite the story, right? Obviously, you got Nathan Rourke, who last year with the BC Lions, before he suffered that serious injury, he was putting up historical numbers.
Talk about shredding. He was shredding
the league. Both with his arm and his legs.
Yes.
He was running for a lot of yards and running for a lot of touchdowns. And, Dave paints a scenario that's true. Trevor Lawrence is the man.
Of course.
And that's not changing. Trevor Lawrence is the guy. He's the quarterback. Rourke knows that. But injuries happen in football all the time. And fine, a veteran gets in there, maybe replaces him. But if there's struggles there, and Rourke is putting up numbers in the preseason, and he will have a couple more opportunities to do that with a couple more preseason games. And if he keeps putting up those third down stats, he keeps running for yards and throwing for yards and touchdowns and making smart plays, there are scenarios in football that are not that far-fetched where you can get in there for a period of time. And all you need to do in the NFL is show it for 2 or 3 games.
Right.
And then that team won't necessarily give you the deal, but someone else will. Right.
You're right.
There's just such a small amount of opportunity for players to actually prove it on game day because they don't play that many games in the NFL.
So true.
You see it all the time. Remember Matt Flynn with the Packers?
Oh, yeah.
He had that great Week 16 game against the Lions, threw for 500 yards. That got him a deal with Seattle, I think, a year or 2 later. And he wasn't a quarterback. He was never going to be a quarterback. But that's all he needed. One great game in the regular season.
And that's why
boom,
even just doing what he's done in the preseason, just showing those flashes that he is a playmaker, that he's a special guy, right? And that goes a long way, man. It really does.
It sure does. Yep, it sure does.
But I don't think we're rating how difficult it is or how against the odds it is that you've got not one but 2 brothers coming out of the same household, the second one coming out of Canadian high school with, they're dominant college players, albeit not in the Power 5, but, in a good conference. and they're on the, sort of on the radar.
Right.
One of them's on a roster. The other one's on the radar of NFL teams. Like we haven't seen this before.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it really is. So we'll see. We'll see what comes of Nathan Rourke, Curtis Rourke down in Ohio. It feels like football time with the weather today, right?
Yes.
I mean, it feels like the fall outside. It feels like a Saturday, Sunday in October out there in Toronto today.
Too soon.
Yeah, way too soon. It's still August. Let's not get silly here. TSN 1050 once again delivering backpacks filled with school supplies to support local families. It's all part of our 9th annual back-to-school backpacks events happening Wednesday, August 23rd, next Wednesday. This year's event is presented by Healthy Planet. Together in partnership with the Children's Breakfast Clubs, 1,010 young students will receive the tools they need to succeed before the school bell rings in September. For all the details, please head to tsn1050.ca. Jays Reds tonight, this weekend. We'll tee it up. Also, our Best Bets brought to you by FANDUEL. We'll do that next. All right, today's Best Bets powered by FANDUEL. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FANDUEL Sportsbook app. All right, I'm on Atlanta run line tonight versus the Giants. All right,
okay.
Atlanta run line. I like Ronald Acuna Jr. to record at least a hit tonight. And the Orioles money line against the Athletics. I don't have to explain why that would be the case. It's Baltimore and it's Oakland. You get plus 234 on that. Again, the Giants they're a good team. Giants are a good team. Braves are the best team in baseball. Again, Acuna Jr., your boy. You love Ronald Acuna Jr. I do as well.
I do.
To record at least one hit tonight, Orioles money line over the Athletics, paying plus 234. Today's best bets are powered by FanDuel. Bet on star players to score, assist, or have a shot on goal in a soccer same-game parlay. Please play responsibly. Must be 18 plus and physically located in Ontario. All right, Jays Reds this weekend. You got the BMW continuing.
Yeah.
Down in the Chicago area, I believe. And the Canadians, they're trying to get into that Tour Championship,
Top 30,
right?
baby. A lot of money. A lot of money at stake.
A lot of money. Well, I mean, Corey Connors he's looking pretty good right now.
He is.
Like Nick Taylor's in. Taylor's going to get in.
Yes.
But last time I checked, Connors was lurking. I haven't looked at the leaderboard.
Yeah, Svensson's looking good.
Svensson, yeah, Connors is T13. Svensson is T26 right now.
26, so right in the bubble.
Yep, he's right on the bubble. So
Hadwin's got to do some work. He's T35.
Yeah, Nick Taylor's not having a great week. He's 3 over on the tournament, I believe. But again, he's basically solidified his spot there. So yeah, one more week, and then the next time we really focus on golf will be the Ryder Cup. It doesn't sound like they're going to use any of the live guys. Like, it doesn't sound like that's going to happen, which I guess is not overly surprising, but maybe Koepka. Like,
I think Koepka's going to be there.
He should be.
They need him. Like,
yeah, exactly.
He's clutch, man.
He is. Yeah, DJ's clutch. DJ's one of the great Ryder Cup competitors of all time.
That's the thing. Not everybody's built for the Ryder Cup. You know, people bring up the fact as good as Tiger wasn't very good in team competition.
No, Phil wasn't great.
No.
Right? The Americans, they got roasted during the Woods-Mickelson era.
Yeah. Like,
when those two were at their height, the Europeans were dominating.
It's really the only thing you can say about Tiger that's not flattering outside of his, of course, escapades. But in terms of his resume as a golfer, he just did not do well in team golf.
No, he didn't. I guess that speaks to his mentality. It's like, what do I care about anyone else?
Right.
Not that he wasn't patriotic and wanted to win for the States and all that, but he was always on his own program.
He certainly was.
He didn't want anyone else in his world. And
no, it was like it kind of like his whole thing was build a wall around you, and like almost an impenetrable force field, and be intimidating to all these guys. And he didn't want to pal around with them.
No, he didn't. He had no interest.
That aura.
Because it was so successful. That aura was incredibly successful. Mail It In Friday brought to you by Boston Pizza. Weekends are better with fish bowls and frosty pints on the BP patio. Grab your sunscreen. Let's have a weekend. See you on the BP patio. Sure, it's very sunny and warm somewhere in the country.
Yes.
Where a BP patio is calling your name. I don't know if it's necessarily in Toronto today, but it will be this weekend.
Forecast looks good.
Beautiful tomorrow and really hot on Sunday.
Patio weather.
Kings Plate weather as well on Sunday. And the Jays, of course, down in Cincinnati. You got some golf. You got some good things cooking here, Dave.
I'm not comfortable with this King's Plate stuff. They called it the Queen's Plate all those years.
I know.
You don't change the name.
It's a good point. Like, I guess it started with Queen Victoria, I believe.
Right.
And it's the longest running race
North
in
America.
North America.
Yeah,
And
older than the Kentucky Derby.
yeah, it's going back over 160 years.
Yeah.
And it was the Queen's Plate. And then obviously with Queen Elizabeth, it was the Queen's Plate for 60 years.
Right.
And now it's the King's Plate. It'd be nice if Charles, how about make your way over here, Charles?
Well, I was there when the Queen was there the one time. It was a few
really?
years. Yeah,
that was significant.
That was wild. But, why not just call it like the Queen's Memorial Plate and just like leave it there? Like,
right.
I think everybody loved the Queen, it seemed, or a lot of people loved the Queen. She was well regarded. I'm not sure the same can be said of the King.
Yeah, I guess you got to be consistent. I guess whoever's in charge over there.
It's like I don't know. It's like renaming the Stanley Cup. Like we've been going with it for so long.
I know it's been forever. The Queen's Plate has been, but my whole life it's been the Queen's Plate.
I don't like the renaming. How about just keep it the Queen? Like would
Okay.
Charles have been offended if we just said she? And the other thing was the Queen was really big into horse racing.
Right, love the ponies.
Love the ponies.
Almost more than any old
ponies. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Maybe not. Maybe not quite on the same level.
So did you get your notes down from Eddie? You got all the horses you're going to be picking?
Yeah.
You're all good?
Calco Paiku. I like that. That's
a hell of a name.
That's a great handle. 15. You like the 2-horse, the 3-horse, the 8-horse.
Wickenheiser's the 8.
Those.
Wickenheiser's the 8.
Trifecta, superfecta. I'm going to do it all.
Oh, you're going to go crazy?
I'm going to get absolutely absurd. Yeah, I'll lose a ton of money.
Okay.
More than likely, but you never know.
If you're picking Eddie's ponies, you'll be all right, bro.
If I'm picking, I trust Eddie more than anyone when it comes to capping ponies.
Yeah.
Like Eddie is the king. So, yeah, I think I'll make – actually, you're right. I need to retract that statement. I plan on making money, courtesy of Eddie.
Well, throw
I guess send him like 10%.
In honor of Eddie, throw a couple of shekels down on an 80-1 shot.
I will. Yep, I'll go long shot for Eddie-O. Has to happen.
Have to.
All right, Dave, great stuff, buddy. Thank you for doing this.
Great seeing you.
There's Dave Feschuk of the Toronto Star. Thank you for tuning in today. Radio, TV, podcast, web. We appreciate it. Everyone behind the scenes for helping out as well. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy your weekends. We're back Monday at 4 p.m. We'll chat then.